number of people who died after an Air Force plane attacked a refugee camp in Nigeria has risen to 90. Doctors Without Borders say the plane circled twice and dropped 2 bombs in the middle of the town of Rann, which hosts thousands of internally displaced people. To give us an update, we're joined in studio now by Borrie La Grange. She's the head of communications at Doctors Without Borders. Borrie, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the program again.
Good morning.
So you say, according to residents and community leaders, we're quoting 90, but there very well be maybe more people that have been killed.
Yeah. So we had a team inside Rann on the 17th of January, and they were doing a needs assessment and also vaccinating children. And while they were doing this is when the attack occurred. So people were telling us that they saw the plane circling back after the first bomb was dropped. And the bombs actually hit a couple of meters away from the Nigerian Red Cross office in town. And at this stage, that's very worrying to us because it's really important that people who've been displaced in a very brutal conflict that's lasted for several years at least have the assurance of safety and protection by Nigerian forces.
Yeah. I mean, explain to us what Rann is, because you guys, as you say, have been operating there, I think, or working there since 2014.
So the conflict between the Nigerian government and Boko Haram has been ongoing for several years. And in particular, it's located in Borno State, which is in the northeast corner of Nigeria. Rann is a small town, about 10 kilometers away from the border with Cameroon. And it's close to the Lake Chad region, which has really been a hotbed of conflict and displacement. So over a number of years, about 3 million people have been displaced. And this year, we hope to see a slight improvement in the situation. Last year, certainly, the conditions were absolutely horrific. It's a health catastrophe. High levels of malnutrition persisted in many of the towns where our teams are able to work.
Yeah. So I mean, you give an explanation of this particular town and this area, and there's, I mean, these are innocent people you're talking about, and there are some reports that suggest that a mistake may have been made on the part of the Nigerian military, that they may have been looking for Boko Haram. I mean, what would be your take on this?
Well, our team, who were treating the wounded immediately in the aftermath of the attack, tell us that most of the wounded were women and children, and they witnessed horrific injuries. So shrapnel injuries, in many instances people had suffered open fractures, so broken bones, flesh torn apart. Some people had their intestines piling out of their bodies because of the extent of the explosion that ripped apart their bodies.
My goodness me. How many people are there in this camp? I mean, what are we dealing with?
So Rann is, as I said, it's a small town, but it's currently home to between 20 and 40,000 displaced people.
Okay.
And this is a pattern that you see in many of the other small towns in Borno State as well, where many people from the surrounding countryside have been displaced by the conflict and are now seeking assistance inside smaller towns where people are living in incredibly decrepit conditions.
Sure. Is there any more assistance that's come into Rann ever since this happened?
So, in the bigger scheme of things, over the last couple of months, the situation has improved slightly in terms of more aid coming through to some of these towns. But there are many other towns that remain cut off. Aid organizations are not able to move freely and assess needs independently because they're largely reliant on the ability of the Nigerian military to secure certain areas before any assistance is being provided. And this really hampers our ability to provide assistance to people who so far remain cut off from any assistance.
Yeah. I mean, we all know about Boko Haram and havoc and the pain that it's brought to, some of the people of Nigeria. I mean, we have a look at the girls, that's just one thing, those Chibok girls that we're still uncertain of, many of their lives, and they've been abducted. How does Boko Haram continue to disrupt Nigerians in the Borno State? How do they continue to move around like this?
It's certainly a really difficult situation. If we look at not just what Boko Haram does or does not do, the dynamics of the conflict between it and the Nigerian government have wreaked incredible levels of havoc on civilians' lives. So the displacement is one thing, but what we've also seen is, as a consequence of that, high levels of malnutrition because people cannot cultivate any crops, they cannot trade. Food prices have risen incredibly. So the period between March and June this year will be very critical And that's really important, that there is a greater influx of aid into this area, so people do not face the same challenges over and over again in a conflict that's been so brutal.
Yeah, even with new leadership, it just appears that that the government of Nigeria just does not have enough power and is not doing enough to protect the people against Boko Haram.
Well, our call to the Nigerian government is to ensure that the circumstances surrounding this attack in particular are dealt with and investigated in a very transparent manner, because that's what the people of Rann deserve. They deserve a transparent account of what led to this and what led to the death of between 90 to 200 people in an attack on a civilian area that was under the control of the Nigerian government.
Yeah. All right, talking to us here on the program about what happened in Rann. It's a devastating story when an Air Force plane attacked a refugee camp in Nigeria. As you heard from Borrie, about 90 to 200 people may have been killed in this particular attack. Borrie La Grange is from Doctors Without Borders and the head of communications there, and Doctors Without Borders working there in this particular camp. All right, the time now is exactly 5 minutes before 7 on this Monday morning. Let's get you a weather update. Here's Phil.